Good afternoon. Yeah, my name's Andy Young. I'm a senior systems engineer, and the major part of my role is to test critical infrastructure. So critical infrastructure being network security devices, so things like next-gen firewalls, IDS, IPS, web application firewalls, and the like. And the idea is I want to just explain how I do that and share some kind of experiences and kind of bring you up to date, because the world of networks and security change all the time, right? So usually, I can get involved at various different stages of the life cycle of a network. A typical scenario would be where a customer says, do you know what, I want to build out this new infrastructure, and it consists of some firewalls and routers and switches and such like. And I've spoken to the vendor, and they say I need 10 next-gen firewalls in here, so I just need you to come in and test it. So I would come in and create a test plan and work out exactly what their network's going to be transporting in terms of applications and all this kind of stuff. And of course, I go ahead and test, and then I find out, well, do you know what? The vendor based the sizing of the firewalls on a data sheet based on some kind of testing that they had to do, but it wasn't testing for how you've deployed them. So that's really important, right? So at the end of that, you might find that the end customer says, wow, that's really interesting. So actually I need 12 boxes, and everyone's happy. The vendor sells more firewalls maybe. But either way, the best part of it is the end customer gets to sleep the night before he rolls out his data center and goes live. Of course, it's an ongoing cycle, and what I like to do also is to be able to help a customer for when he needs to upgrade the software, for example, on his firewall. So instead of the vendor giving him the next software upgrade, and he just rolls it out live and finds out whether that performs better or worse than before, you could put that box into a lab environment and find out how it does before you roll out. Again, it aids to better sleep the night before. As time goes on, I guess all the optimization, colleagues of mine deal with network visibility and such, but I'm more on the test side. So how does this connectivity work? Well, on the right-hand side, I would call that one-arm testing. So if you wanted to test some infrastructure, maybe it's a web service or something like that, what you can do is connect in one-arm mode. So you would have some kind of traffic generator that's ramping up the traffic, and you're finding out how many connections per second, or launching a DDoS attack to see how it kind of survives. The left-hand side would be what I would call a two-arm mode, and that's the usual kind of scenario where you'll be testing, say, a next-gen firewall in a lab environment. So you would be emulating clients on one side and servers on the other. You'll be generating good traffic. You'll be generating malicious traffic, so the hacking attempts as well. So that's kind of how the connectivity would look. Now, I'm kind of just the wrong side of 50 now, and I've got a lot of experience in testing. And when I cast my mind back and think, well, a couple of decades ago, what did the networks look like? Well, the applications that were carried on there were vastly different, far more simplistic. The load was a lot less. The threat landscape was completely different. In them days, the way we used to test networks was quite simple. And the reason for that was the network devices used to be far more simple, because we used to throw like layer 2, 3 packets. Okay, so layer 1 being physical layer and layer 7 being your applications. So we used to send kind of small dumb packets out of box, and it would be shifting packets from one port to the next, and would usually perform really well, and that's all great. Nowadays, I can't think of a single network security device, or not pretty much any device that sits on a network that's not concerned about content. So, they all have DPI engines, and, you need to kind of stress those DPI engines. There's no point in throwing that same layer 2, 3 traffic at a next-gen firewall. It's going to perform brilliantly. And then you're going to put it in the real environment, it's going to perform really bad. So it's all about creating that realism. So I like to use boxes that create that realism, and they exist these days. I'm still surprised how many people will still be sending, kind of dumb traffic through intelligent devices and wondering why they get really good results. Incredible. But there we go. The way I like to do it is to create, because I would say the biggest thing that affects the performance of any network device is that realism. So you could have the same box, the same specification firewall, if we stick to that same scenario. You could have it configured exactly as you're going to deploy it. You could put one mix of traffic through and it's going to perform really well. You could put another mix of traffic through and it will perform terribly. We had one example where a bank said, we need to do a vendor bake-off. So we need to test 4 different vendors, and they had some really specific issues because they said, we want one vendor. We don't want to have a number of different vendors because we want the operators to be familiar with one particular box. So the problem they had then was this was being deployed in different environments. So one was like a trading environment, one was a web portal, one was an e-banking environment. So the traffic was vastly different. And the interesting thing is when you look at the TCP baseline that they originally stuck to, so the bank says, I want this specification box, so many connections per second, so much throughput. All the vendors gave exactly the same specifications according to their data sheets. Why wouldn't they? So on paper, they all looked exactly the same. There was a vast difference when you started running traffic through. So you run the web traffic, one vendor performed really well, a couple of others performed really badly. But at the end of the test, with those 4 different mixes of traffic with those 4 different vendors, they had a really clear idea of exactly what was the best solution for them. And it was all down to the traffic. You deploy that same firewall in a different environment, you would choose a different vendor, because of your mix of traffic. So that's what's key to it, really. So what I do is I find out from the end customer, what traffic are you running? So I want to know exactly what mix of traffic it is. And I've got the ability to select, a certain mix of traffic. There's loads of predefined ones that I could go and get. And if it's, the first half 2013 of Asia Pacific Mobile, well, there you go, it's great. But I can then go in, because I'm lazy, right? So I might use that as a template and say, that's just about what I want, but I want some more Facebook in there, I want some more YouTube, etc., and I can change that to my heart's content. So this is what I would do. I would create a mixture of traffic, and you can see here on the right-hand screen, there's a whole bunch of what look like protocols. I'll come to that in a minute. I call them superflows, but a whole bunch of protocols blended together to emulate the mix of traffic that's on your network. That's the key to it for me. That's the biggest thing that's going to affect your performance. So I want to replicate that exactly. Next thing I ought to say is that, casting my mind back as well, HTTP used to be considered as an application or a protocol, and really that's not the case these days. I mean, so many what we know as applications now use HTTP, so HTTP is a transport, right? So things like Facebook and Google Mail are actually the applications, but they all use HTTP as a transport protocol. So we need to kind of distinguish between that, right? But when it comes to defining these protocols, you can change them to your heart's content. You can drill down, you can define every action that you want. So you can define what the client actions are, what the server actions are, and even if you really care about it, why not get the test generator to generate some files for you, so attachments. So instead of you sending the same attachment every time, which the DPI engine would breeze through, why not get it to generate random-sized file attachments? So you might want to say, I want an MP3 format between this size and that size. You can do that. You can also go in and create random tokens. And the other thing you can do, use Markov text generation. So instead of sending out a whole bunch of emails at high rate and all the content is all the same size, all the same characters, etc., wouldn't it be great if your emails actually looked real? And wouldn't it be great if you could put keywords in? So we use Markov text generation. You could upload Hound of the Baskervilles and say, oh, I want between 200 and 400 characters from there, and put keywords in there as well, subway and bomb and all these kind of things. And you can use those in many different protocols, not just SMTP, but HTTP and various chat protocols as well. The idea being, even if you have like random attachments, those random attachments can have the content generated with HTML, with Markov text generation as well. So that's your realism, right? That's exactly what you want to be on your network. Because, as I say, DPI, any device that's on your network, chances are it's got a DPI engine. Chances are it's concerned about layer 7. It wants to block, shape, reroute, accelerate, do something with the content, right? And you know, and the more you want to do with that content, the more it's going to slow down. So the more firewall rules you have, the more things like VLANs, more zones, and this kind of thing. The more configuration you have on a device, the more it's going to affect. So the more you inspect, the more it slows down. Now, of course, we're the Switzerland in all of this, so we can't take sides at all. We can just provide data, and we sanitize it so much that it looks like it's just been invented. But in fact, a colleague of mine did some tests the other day, well, the other month now actually, and he tested a 20 gig firewall, and when it was configured as deployed, so I say 20 gig firewall according to the data sheet, when he configured it with all the VLANs, all the zones, all the firewall rules, with a specific mix of traffic, that went down to 1.5 gigs. And that's far more dramatic even than this screen is showing you there. The other thing I really like is being able to send the malicious traffic as well. So what I mean by this is being able to send, of course, the good traffic that I've spoke of so far, but at the same time, you'd want to send some malicious traffic as well. So these would be hacking attempts, for example. So these are bad guys trying to get on your system. Now, you know, if I'm being the clients and I'm being the servers, and I know the data that I'm sending, these hacking attempts, I can work out whether the firewall's blocked me or not. So at the end of the test, I can say, well, okay, when I was running 8 gigs of throughput, I also ran a whole bunch of security strikes that were targeting like Linux infrastructure or something, and I got 90% blocked. But more importantly, then I can go down to the ones that weren't blocked, and I can work out what was wrong with my configuration, and I can change that. So I can kind of aim towards having 100% block rate. And the same goes for the malware. There's a whole bunch of malware I've got available, and also I can upload my own malware as well. So if you've got some kind of, well, it wouldn't be zero, but if you've got some malware that you've just created and you want to make sure that it's detectable, well, you can upload it and send that across as well. Now, because this is all done statefully, one of the techniques you can use to try and evade detection, to try and make sure that the security device is detecting you, or blocking you rather, is to try some evasion techniques. So some of the simpler ones that we can do is things like TCP fragmentation. So what you might want to do is to see that a device in the middle has a good reassemble engine. If it doesn't, what it's going to do is it's going to see tiny little packets of, you know, all the data that you're trying to send, and it's going to inspect a little part of that and say, that's okay, pass it through. Of course, the server at the other end will reassemble it, and there you go, you've got your security strike through. So that can be applied to TCP fragmentation, segmentation, fragmentation, etc. So there's a whole bunch that you can apply right the way up to layer 7. So really cool features to be able to make sure that you're blocking absolutely every single strike. I wanted to talk quickly about data loss prevention as well and lawful intercept, because a while ago we had some customers that said, well, your box is great, we can do what we want, but wouldn't it be great if we had this kind of needle in a haystack scenario to test our lawful intercept scenario? So what we did was we created an interface where you can, on the left-hand side, you'll see that's the haystack. So we can just say, I want 500 megs of enterprise traffic or whatever it's going to be. And on the right-hand side, we can inject in keywords or targets, rather. So you could inject in credit card numbers, for example, or you can inject in keywords, subway bomb and all that kind of stuff. And the cool thing is, at runtime, you get to see exactly what we sent in terms of the timestamp, the tuples, and the keywords as well. DDoS simulation is of course, a big subject, and I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but suffice to say that going back in time again, some of those layer 2, 3 devices might be great for doing some of the volumetric DDoS attacks. But what we see quite a lot these days is the layer 7. Things, again, have moved up the stack, the DDoS attacks, the security strikes, etc. And so what we see now is things like slow Loris and slow post appearing quite a lot, and usually at the same time as maybe some volumetric attacks. And we were able to simulate that as well. So because these applications are stateful, we can, in the case of a slow post, say, I'm going to post this great big file to you, but I'm going to do it in a couple of byte chunks, and then I'm going to go into a little loop and a go to, wait 20 seconds, and then go back again and send you another couple of chunks. So that's going to exhaust the resources of your device under test. And finally, because of this layer 2 to layer 7 capability, it's really kind of easy to simulate users, right, or actions on the network. You can simulate, for example, a user going online, doing some browsing, clicking on a wrong link, downloading some malicious files, and then outgoing command and control messages and this kind of thing. So the whole botnet simulation as well. So I don't tend to test that so much, of course, but that's something else that's kind of becoming more prevalent. But the idea being that, you know, things have changed in the testing world. Now you can do some really funky stuff with the testing, and it's all kind of layer 7. That's very important these days. So, and at that, I will say thanks very much for your time. If you had any questions, please come see me. I'm in the main room.